Hey guys, Karnath here. Today I'm going to talk to you about charged bolts. And with this build, it's going to focus on the damage it can do. And it's also going to revolve around a couple of uniques in here, which I typically haven't done. I'm also going to show you, you don't necessarily need the uniques to pull off this build and other options you could do without those in order to have the successful. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right into the build. And even before I get into the build, shout out to Elgato11. He said, hey, do a charge bolt build on my stream. And I was like, okay, I'll do a charge bolt builds. And here I am doing it for you. Okay, so here is charge bolts. So I'm just gonna jump into the skill tree. So in here, enhancements, I always put these two, but I wanted to kind of say on this one, it does a lot more extra damage for this build, and I like the chilling, and it gives you the crowd control aspect of it. You could technically potentially do teleport as your other one, and they'll give you a short range teleport. And with the boots I have the ones that lower the evade cooldown by 1.2 seconds, I believe. And it is really nice. It is really fun. You just will have more mobility that way versus more damage this way. And as you can see, I just went Arc Lash for my basic skill. You could go Spark, and I tell you this because I haven't really used this a lot, and it feels kind of weird and clunky to me in this build. But then again, I don't have a lot of attack speed, or all my things aren't aligned properly to really make use of Arc Lash the best. So I still think Arc Lash would be better because you're going to get into the thick of things with charge bolts, and that's kind of how it works. But anyway, you could do Spark if you really wanted to, especially if you don't have one of the uniques, and I'll tell you when I get to there. So charge bolts, obviously, and we're actually gonna do the increased damage to stun enemies. I don't see this one being as useful. This one amps up the damage a lot more, and you can stun pretty easily with this build. Now, my flame shield with my heal, of course, and then teleport, which I get the damage reduction on there because we are not going to be focusing on crackling energy. You know me, glass cannon, I like this one. And then we're going to get our elemental attunement for the cooldown reduction when you get a crit. And then Frost Nova, we're going to have the vulnerable damage right here for 4 seconds to 6 seconds. And then Ice Armor. And I kind of keep Ice Armor here because I have extra skills in here. So as you can see, I have extra skills in Frost Nova and Charge Bolt and Ice Armor. You don't need the Ice Armor one, but I have this here. In fact, if there was a skill I would say that you could kind of go around without, it might be Ice Armor. But that extra defense in the barrier really does help when you're in the thick of things. When I go down here, I always just get one in here just so it stacks. And then my lucky hit. So you have an increased lucky hit chance. And then the extra burning damage. This is great. 30% increased critical strike damage. It's always a really good one, especially, again, when you're using Firebolt enchantment. And here I just went, when you stun an enemy, you do extra damage. And I'm not focusing on crackling energy. So this is just to get to here, and we don't need this one. When we get down to here, we're just doing increased to chill damage right here. 9% increase is actually very nice. And then we get all these guys right here, and no ultimate in this one. And for our key passive, we're going to do close enemies take 10% increased damage from your shock skills and deal 20% less damage to you. And this one's really good with this one because you're going to be in the thick of things, and it makes no sense to get the crackling energy one. And that's pretty much this breakdown. Again, these ones are kind of having a extra crit chance or guaranteed crit plus the 15% less damage. And these ones, whenever you're using lightning, just always grab these ones. So that's kind of it with the skills. I'm going to jump over to not the shop, but the Paragon board. And I'll kind of go over a few things a little wonky with this, but I'll start actually. I'm going to start off with showing you the glyphs. So destruction, because it's our core skill, and we want extra damage when we do crit strikes because it's multiplicative. And I still have flame feeder, and for the burning aspect, again, that's multiplicative in that direct damage for the burning enemies. We have control, which is why I have the what is it, frostbolt? Yeah, frostbolt is there to make sure I get this and crowd control real easily. So another 10% for chilled. If they happen to freeze, it's 20, but and that helps with frost nova. So that's another increase in damage. And then because we're doing vulnerable, we have exploit. And as you can see, it's only level 6 for me, and control's only level 11. So there it goes. As far as it goes, standard sorcerer, I feel like, is kind of this path. But for your first glyph, I kind of have these in weird spots because I've had all 4 glyph boards up there. So don't necessarily go control with your first one. In fact, you might even want to consider doing destruction. Just I like destruction because it does increase to your core damage and crits, and you'll already be doing crits with lightning, so that might actually be your first one. And exploit would actually probably be your second one. I want to say it could be your first one, but for me, I want to say second one because I like the guaranteed increase from this with the crit strikes. So once you get at least these two out of the way, the destruction and exploit, then I would say, depending on if you're using chilled or not, I would say control is really good. And then your flame feeder is these can be third or fourth. You can intermingle with them. Like they could either go flame feeder first or the other one first. And as far as a legendary node or legendary nodes, the only node I picked up right now is stunning close enemies restores 10 mana, just because it's another source of regaining your mana. And it's not the best, but it's something. And you'll see why, like, I'm always out of mana in this build. And that's kind of why I picked it up. All right, as for the boards themselves, I did a first round at them and I messed up, and I had forgotten about a board, which is really bad because it actually will help out a lot with this build. So your first board here would actually really be beneficial if you did Frigid Fate. Not necessarily for the legendary node because you're not going to be doing cold damage, but for the oppressive, vulnerable damage and damage reduction from vulnerable, the vulnerable damage here and weakness, as well as the guarded has damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. So all those things are really good. You can even get a lucky hit chance in here, so you can increase that as well if you prefer to have that extra lucky hit chance. So this one I would actually say could be your second board instead of my random crackling energy board that I have here, and still follow the same glyphs that I had mentioned before. And then for your third board, I would recommend doing this burning one first because you're going to be burning everything. So for your third board, do the burning damage one so you can get more armor, more damage reduction from elites and that sort of thing, and increase your damage to burning enemies. And that will be better overall for your third board. Now, as for your fourth board, I would say do this one. It's a static surge. Again, it's kind of up to you. Like, I feel like this board, the static surge board, if you really feel like this will help your mana up, you can prioritize this into your fourth board as your second board if you want to just get that really quick to see how it works for you. And if you like it, perfect. Then go ahead and get that as your second, but then do, your third board as the other ice one and then this burning one. But I would almost say your fourth board would be this, because then, you can increase your damage to stunned and elites here. And again, damage to stunned here and damage to stunned here. And if you really want to, you could pick up some 4 mana nodes here. But that would be kind of the order of the boards. I would say in order to do, if you had to pick a fifth board, um, instead of the, well, not instead, in addition to the Frigid Fate, I would say this Icefall one would actually be a good one. Now, you can go for the legendary node if you want extra barriers when you're killing frozen enemies. Completely up to you. And it would help with those packs. And if you kill one enemy, you get this, but then you're going to be able to stack a lot of barrier this way. I don't, it's completely up to you. I don't know if this would be worth it or not. If you do have the extra points, go for it. But I would say, damage reduction from chilled, damage to chilled and non-physical. These are really good to consider right here. And especially if you're doing if you're getting the chill from your Frostbolt enhancement, I would say that one is definitely worth it. Those would be like the 5 total boards, including your initial. So 4 added boards that you would do. And as far as your additional glyph, you can choose for Tactician. This would give you a bonus to the rare nodes, and you could put that in with your vulnerable if you want, to get extra additional vulnerable increase there. You could do territorial, and this would help with close targets. And I believe there was one more you could potentially do. The torch one. But I would say, play around with Tactician or Territorial for an additional one. One, because you get bonus to your rare nodes, and that could actually boost a lot of, any of these guys. Like, so if I were to place it here, I'd get a boost to my stunned, and it stunned enemies here and boosted intelligence. I could put it here, extra damage reduction for burning. And again, you could put it in something like Frigid Fate to get oppressive up. I can't remember if that's near a node or not, but we can preview it at least. So if you were to preview this, 10% vulnerable damage. Even though this is just cold resistance, getting that extra right there would be worth it. So yeah. And if we go to Icefall, say if you were to put it in Icefall instead, 15% damage to chilled, damage reduction for chilled. So you can do it here or your burning one. And that would be that would actually be pretty good. That's pretty much it for those parts. Now I'm going to go over itemization a little bit more here. And I would swap some things out, and it's my thing is kind of wonky. And you can see I have like random armor down at the bottom. But so first we're going to talk about our uniques. The Staff of Lamb Essen. Now I wanted to roll higher on this. It's only 706 item power. And I wanted to roll higher on this to try to get the more base damage, but I haven't found one yet. So you can see this was level 65. I found this. It still does good. And also the unique modifier is charge bolts pierce, but deal 29% less damage. Now, if you got this better roll of 25%, this would be the optimal choice for it. Now you can see does lightning damage, damage to close, damage to injured, and the lucky hit doesn't happen all too often, but it's there as well. So this kind of makes your charge bolts pierce, and it actually works out really well. Now you can see my attack power is really low, but it actually works out really well for a lot of packs. But for single target right now, since it's only 706, it is not as good. Now, obviously the gems here you can have, because it's vulnerable damage in this build, you could also opt for emeralds, but I have these ones in here because I've been experimenting with multiple ways to do this build. So the other thing you kind of want to get for your other unique is the Raiment of the Infinite. Now, for me, I don't know if anyone else is having trouble getting these. This is like my 3rd or 4th one of this, so I've gotten a lot of these ones, it feels like. But the thing here is, after using teleport, close enemies are pulled to you and stunned for 2.8 seconds, but teleport's cooldown is increased by 20%. So this kind of gives you that a slight vacuum effect in with the close enemies, and that is perfect for charge bolts. And even with this, because when it pierces, it'll keep hitting things in the pack, and it will actually keep producing this lightning nova, this other effect that it has, and it just stacks up to just lots of numbers really fast. So that's why doing this and this helps out this nova damage as well as the overall damage, and why even though it's a much lower attack power right now, it actually does keeps up with damage with some of my other better staffs. Now, if you don't have these, I'll tell you some options you can do. If you don't have this staff, don't worry. It's actually, what it does is it helps with packs. And because it pierces, it'll keep, and let me talk about the charge bolts have 15% chance to be attracted to enemies and last 300% longer. This is a necessity in this build, and it's a base one for me. As you can see, 15% lowest roll. And when it pierces, it can seek enemies, and it'll keep seeking for until they expire. And so that's when you get a ton of novas going off over and over, because it keeps just recycling, going around and around and around. And that's what makes this plus this so powerful. But even without this guy here, this is still worthwhile to get. So always put this on your build. So other options. So say if you didn't have this, the piercing effect, that's okay. With this build, I would say if you still have the Rayman of the Infinite, still keep teleport on there, still keep this build as is, and just swap out to a staff that has vulnerable damage on it. And I like doing the skills deal up to 40% increased damage, because while we won't have it all the time because our resource will go down, that first hit is going to do a lot more damage. And make sure you get critical strike damage, crowd control, and some intelligence. This is kind of rolled really well for me. So that's what I would aim for. So it's okay if you don't have this staff. It's just going to play a little differently. Now, say if you did not have the staff or the armor, the build kind of changes at that point, and you won't have this dissection effect from the teleport, which is okay. You can actually do a couple of things. So I would say you could take off teleport. Now, when you take off teleport, you have options. You could put on lightning spear and just have that kind of go in there. You could actually do Inferno with the pole in there. This will help with your big packs and get them kind of together when you have like multiple elites in there. And actually, it works out really well. You're not relying on this for damage. You're just relying on this pull effect. And your other option could be unstable currents. And it's not my favorite option actually in this build because it just doesn't seem to work out as well. I don't get as many charge bolts or novas, but you can do this. I mean, at least get the first node. You could get the second node as well if you'd like, but it will help out with overall damage too. And if you want to keep teleport, you can keep it for sure for mobility's sake. And it just becomes a little awkward to work around because you won't get as many of the novas hitting your enemies. And so Frost Nova, I would say you could keep this on there at all times, because the way I've experimented with it is this works out better than anything I've had to experiment with, regardless of how the packs work out. Now, when you're doing Frost Nova, make sure to get ranks of it in your boots. That's pretty much what I wanted to aim for in the boots here. And also make sure that you have your Frost Nova gains an additional charge, but as long as you have those two, it'll be definitely really good to have. And make sure your rings do have some source of vulnerable damage on them. Now, as far as the amulet, I have this basic skill grants 20% damage reduction. I like this one, but you can actually opt for what my staff has, like critical strikes with core skills, increase your attack speed. And I say that especially if you're running low, that'll increase your arc lash efficiency overall. And that's what I would say if you want that on your amulet and want to move this basic skill, grants damage reduction. Other than that, it's kind of up to you. I do like this crowd controlled enemy lucky hit when this does trigger. I haven't paid attention too much to it, but it is a nice effect on here. So that would be your boot effect. And that's pretty much it for the build. And so what we're going to do, yep, I think that's pretty much it for the build. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this nightmare dungeon. And I apologize, it is a tier 33. I was wasting a lot of sigil powers trying to get you a 34 or something, but it did not want to give it to me. And what I will say is you may notice that I actually switch off weapons every so often. That's one of the weird things in this build. You can actually, depending on how your Staff of Lamb Essen rolls, you may not want to have it on all the time. It does great for packs, but does terrible for single target. And at that point, you can have a backup weapon. So when you get to, maybe you're only on a single target or anything, if you don't mind going into your inventory and switching out, your weapon, go ahead, do that, and then go back into it and everything and jump in. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to start with the Staff of Lamb Essen and kind of go through this dungeon. All right, so getting into this pack, let's see, if you do teleport, freeze, and as you can see, I just did one frostbolt and I pretty much died. And while you're waiting for those to come back up, you can walk around, kind of throw out charge bolts, but make sure you have enough mana when you teleport, Frost Nova, and there you go. It kind of works out like that. And I do this kind of tactic because, as you saw, like, it's easy enough to gather them together to freeze, and then the charge bolt works really well in that situation. And yeah, as you can see, like, say a single target, it does take see how they seek? They just keep seeking until see, you can see them seek until they stop. So anyway, another pack here, and again, you can kind of, if you're comfortable with doing that, there you go, and then teleports back up. And you just got to make sure to keep your defensive cooldowns up. Now, will this work out for a higher tier? Probably not as much, but it works out for what you need here. All right, and then we're going to move on. Okay, so you saw how it works in a pack and kind of how that goes. I'm going to switch to a single target one, and you're going to kind of see how that will work in comparison to that multiple within a pack. All right, so here we have, a pack. We're going to try to gather them up so that works out. But even if you have like a pack, right, you can pretty much just do that, and that's it. And you don't necessarily need the extra novas, especially with like a high item power discrepancy, right? As you saw, like, there's this one at 818, and then you have my other staff, which is at 706. Yeah, that's why you won't need it, even if you just do the basic attack here. And when it seeks out, you can kind of see when you're not doing the combo, it kind of feels less efficient. So yeah, you want to try to do the combo. Now, if you have lingering guys, you can always just do a quick that, and Arc Lash will kind of finish him off. So that's the kind of the difference. So you can see where if you didn't have this teleport, this actually works out better, because you saw how they seeked out enemies constantly in that pack and kept going until it expired. Whereas in this one, where I just have the single target and I don't have that special effect, it's just one and done, and you really need to rely on the suction and the Frost Nova in that regard. And even then, so say if you didn't have the suction and Frost Nova, you can try to kind of swirl around and work with it, but it doesn't work out as well. Anyway, we're going to continue on and see if anything else worthwhile pops up. Okay, so we're back on our Staff of Lamb Essen, and I saw an elite, so hopefully it's a full pack, but what we're going to do is going to go in there and kind of see how that performs, because the last time I believe I did the other one, so obviously I got frozen, but even with this, see, you see a lot of Novas end up doing a ton of the damage. And even on single target, yeah, it's not as much because of my item power, but it gets it done. So see, even in just an elite pack of just doing the teleport, freeze, and that is more than enough in this build to kind of proc all those things and get it done. And again, it's helpful when you have something for packs and something for single target, especially if there's a boss or something in here that you need to fight. All right, guys. So that first dungeon did not have a boss, but we're going to do Light's Watch. It's just going to be a basic dungeon. I didn't have a Nightmare Sigil with a boss. So we're going to run through this dungeon here, and we'll go ahead and do a boss fight. All right, guys, here we go. We are at a boss, and I'm going to show you just on the first Staff of Lamb Medicine and how it works on a boss. I mean, even like that. So you saw, I'm going to take a fourth of its bar off, then I'll switch and kind of wait for my mana to regenerate and go from there. Get the another wombo combo, as I would like to put it, on the boss. So see the difference between like a full mana bar with single target staff versus the other one. It was a lot quicker, and that's why I think having a staff, if you're going to go through the route of doing the Frost Nova build, and which is perfectly great with this one, I would say if you don't mind having two separate staves, however you say it, then yeah, switching to this for a boss feels incredible, versus having this staff on there. And that's kind of how that goes. And yeah, this relies a lot on it, depending on how you like to play the build. I like this Staff of Lamb Essen a lot, and it's a lot of fun to go through the dungeon, through packs, through everything with this. It's so much fun. It feels clunky during a boss, and that's only because I mean, damage to injured, damage to close, lightning damage, yeah, those are good modifiers, and you could kill the boss with it just fine. But the two things I have are, one, it's only like 706. You know, if I could get something higher, you know, I have an 818, which is crazy, staff right here. Or, I mean, even this one is just 800. If I were to get something a bit more beefy like that, I think it would feel much better, and it would do a lot more damage in that. Two, if you could get a really good roll and get it closer to the 25% less damage, that's 4% extra damage that you could add to your charge bolt. And then the third part, like here, like having the teleport is great, but I don't know if it's as necessary as I may have made it seem to be, because, you know, I have, you know, my other chest piece where I can have ice armor, makes me unstoppable as well, and then just replace my teleport with Inferno. And while Inferno has a much longer cooldown, I can at least have that option available to me. So overall, the build feels really great, especially with this guy, this staff, and doing the charge bolts and hearing all this thunderous boom, boom, boom is kind of nice. So just beware, you know, may want to turn down your volume a little bit, because it's a lot of booms and they can get really loud. But overall, feels really good, and I feel it really works well with that combo of teleport and Frost Nova, which I have seen in some meta builds, as far as this doing into this to get a ton of damage. And while I try to focus on off meta, it just felt good with Charge Bolt, the way Charge Bolt works, because you need to get in close, because it works better in that kind of thing. Now, as we get into like the pros and cons of this, so the pros is being able to leverage vulnerable damage easily. Again, teleport, frost nova, so basically, the meta for vulnerable damage, which increases the effectiveness of charge bolt and everything. So that is kind of one of the pros, is being able to leverage that. The other pro is when using the unique, great for packs, and the flexibility if you wanted to, having an additional staff for single target. So I would say the flexibility you could have even without the unique staff in there. That feels really good. I don't mind switching between weapons, but if you mind, I don't know if you could get away with doing it. You just might be slower during bosses or slower during packs, or maybe not slower during packs because even the single target does really well. You just won't have this unique effect on it. And since I try to keep it like 2 pros, 2 cons, we'll switch over to cons. The con, definitely mana, resources. Those drain really fast. Like, I want to cast this a lot more, and I can only cast it like 3 times and then it's gone. And it restores slowly, and I don't think there's a lot going for this as far as finding in Paragon boards. Yeah, that helps. You can get a big jump, but after that, I would have to rely on other methods, and I don't have great stuff on me that increases resource generation. Even with that, I still think resources are going to be a main issue with this. And the other con, and I find it a big con because it's very it can be very RNG, right? Is 2 uniques with 1 unique being a staff. And I say this because your staff, your main weapon, it can roll vulnerable damage, or you can and have intelligence, and it can have really big effects, and the imprinted aspect can be really, really powerful on your 2-handed weapon. You're losing a lot of that amazing potential that a staff has for a unique that has okay rolls on it. And while you saw how it could keep up with the single target guy, even with the huge power gap, it's kind of like a give or take. I still think of it as a con because you just don't have that flexibility of stats on this staff. And again, a second unique on there, I having to build around uniques is fun, and it is great, but this means it's only viable later. Maybe it's not even viable until you get to tier 4, tier 3, and that's what makes it kind of a con. All right, so with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and that's pretty much it. All right, I'll see you guys next time.